It is time now for a look at the French press and what's making headlines there. I'm joined by Elena Casas. Good morning, Elena.
Morning, Melissa.
Now, last year, of course, a lot of fuss here in France about the billionaire Liliane Bettencourt, of course, France's richest woman, for giving politicians envelopes. We'd heard a lot about that last year. She is now back on the front page of Libération.
Yes, it was alleged last year she'd given a number of right-wing politicians close to Nicolas Sarkozy envelopes full of cash to help them fund election campaigns. But the president himself wasn't directly incriminated. Now he has been. On the front page of today's Libération, they have Bettencourt affair. The judge accuses Sarkozy. This is about a book which is published tomorrow by the judge Isabelle Prévost-Després, who was in charge of this case originally and then was removed from it last year by the public prosecutor Philippe Corroy, who is a long-term personal enemy of hers, and she now says witnesses told her while she was investigating the case that they saw the president himself receive those envelopes of cash from Liliane Bettencourt when he was running for president in 2007, which would of course constitute illegal campaign funding. Now in the paper they profile Prévost-Després and kind of explain why she's become such a thorn in the side of right-wing politicians and why she has developed this very strong personal enmity with public prosecutor Philippe Corroy, which resulted in her being taken off the case and stopping her investigation. Now, the paper calls Corroy servile and shamelessly trying to protect Sarkozy. He says these kind of relationships with the judicial system are typical of Nicolas Sarkozy's contempt for justice, and that now by publishing this book, Prévost-Després is fighting back. So we'll see how Sarkozy responds to this.
So we should back to that scandal, of course, we'd heard so much about. Now, we also heard yesterday that it was revealed, yesterday, that one French person in 7 is living below the poverty line. What have the papers made of it?
Well, it makes the front page of La Croix, this editorial down here, poor people get poorer. Now, what they point out is that the standard of living for French people overall has risen despite the economic crisis. But there's a small underclass that has been created by this crisis of people who are just dropping out of society. They don't have jobs. A lot of them are young, unemployed people who've left university with no prospects, or they're single mothers. They're living on benefits and they just can't reintegrate back into society. Now, they call on the government not to touch benefits because the government is, of course, rolling out a whole slate full of austerity plans. But the paper points out that at least 4 million people are relying on the French basic minimum benefits, which is €770 a month, which La Croix says is pretty tough to live on, especially in Paris, and the government shouldn't touch it.
It's difficult to imagine actually having to live on it. France, of course, not the only country suffering through the crisis. Le Parisien dedicates its front page to the effects of the crisis on the United States.
Yes, I haven't got it physically this morning, unfortunately, but hopefully we can have a look at the digital edition. Le Parisien's reporters have been to Jefferson County, Alabama this week, and they've done this quite rare front page on an international story. Now, that town has a $4 billion debt for just 700,000 inhabitants, so they've been interviewing people like former public servants who've had to be laid off because the county can no longer afford to pay them, and pensioners living on food stamps. But they do note that some people over there in the US are profiting from this recession. It's the banks and estate agents who are selling on foreclosed homes. That's ones where people can no longer pay their mortgages, sometimes for as little as 40% of the original value.
And finally, Elena, Libya also makes the French front pages today.
Yes, this is in Le Figaro. Their headline is Algeria, the last supporter of Gaddafi. Inside, they take a look at why exactly Algeria has chosen to do this and what the long-term diplomatic consequences could be for them. Now, they say that President Bouteflika is simply terrified of the fear of that the Libyan revolution could spread to Algeria and there could be an insurrection against him. But in the end, it's short-sighted, the paper says. He's isolating himself diplomatically by doing this, and making Algeria look more repressive and autocratic than it did before, which might actually make it more likely that Algerian dissidents start an uprising against him. And there's also a concern, of course, the National Transitional Council in Libya is concerned that Gaddafi's supporters could use Algeria to regroup and launch another insurrection against them. So there's that fear as well.
Elena Casas with all the very latest French headlines. Thanks very much indeed for that.